All right, so people need to know that the music was on purpose because we want to give you a chance to come in. People are gonna be like, "Hey, them cannot hear," but we'll let you hear. We'll let you in now because I bring in one of my close friends, one of my mentors, one of the guys that got me behind a mic and doing a lot of these things that I get to do today, and that's of course the Commish Bob Hogue. So aloha to the commissioner. How are you doing tonight, Commish?
Aloha, Wayne. Great to talk with you. Golly, it's amazing to think how many years that we go back.
Mm-hmm.
You, the, the story, if folks have not heard it, as soon as I got the commissioner job, literally, I may have mentioned that I was looking for some folks. I don't even
You
remember
did
whether
it.
I
You
said
weren't. You weren't.
I
You did
did I
it.
say that I was looking for
No,
an
you did
intern.
it. You
You
did it. That's how.
contacted me out of the blue, and I
Yeah.
called you right away.
Yeah. Yeah. That's just how That's Wayne Coito, right? If I just want something, I went. And I battled a lot my senior year in college, figuring out what I was gonna do, and I saw you get the job. I was like, see, I'm gonna hunt this guy down, and I did it on people. People don't know. Oh, my light almost went. People don't realize I'm so excited telling the story about actually finding you. I didn't have like your email or your phone number, but I knew that you were posting on one of the message boards, one of the UH football
That's right.
message boards.
That's right.
So that's how crazy it is. But see, kids, if you want something, you gotta go out and ask for it. But I was gonna go to grad school. Actually, I was gonna go to UH and do a PhD in economics. That was what I was gonna do. I mean, was ready to start the program, and I wanted to stick around in sports and possibly play. I had a year left, but then that didn't work out. But because I just decided that I wanted to, I had too much fun learning from you and doing all these PacWest things. I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna go all in. And of course, I did a bunch of other things along the way, as you know, that sports people need to do. They need to keep themselves busy and active to be able to, just stick around. Because, as you know, we were both athletes from small kid time through high school to college. And the game changes for us because we might not go to the NBA. That's so unfortunate. I mean, we're so close. I was just on the brink, man.
I think you were a little closer than I was.
But it's like you want to stick around, and athletics administration was an avenue for me that I never really thought about before, and nobody really taught me about. Even when my own college athletic director, who I had seen at a consortium I think something you sent me to, like NACTA, and she was like, Wayne, and it was like, what are you doing here? And she didn't ever thought that somebody in college at her school would have probably pursued ethics. So I thought it was cool, like all these opportunities that I got to have. And you never know in college, right? But if you want something afterwards, you go and get it. So I'm doing what I'm doing right here, and being on this show and talking is something that takes me back to actually when you were doing that show on 1500, and I got to fill in, right?
Right.
I was filling in for Russ, right? Russell Yamanoha, I think.
Yeah, you did. As a matter of fact, that was back in what, 2006 or seven. I got
Yeah.
the job here in 2007.
Yeah.
Um, I'd been doing some radio stuff on 1420 and then 1500. For a little bit, Jai Cunningham and I worked together, but he couldn't, fit it in with all of his Channel 2 stuff. We
Mm-hmm.
worked together for years at Channel 2. Then Russell Yamanoha came in, and as you started interning with me
Mm-hmm.
at the PacWest, and
Mm-hmm.
frankly, as you know, this was right at the very beginning. I mean, we started from the
Mm-hmm.
ground up,
Mm-hmm.
trying to build the conference,
Yep.
and you did a little bit of everything from promotions to broadcasting to compliance to administrative stuff. It was great, as both of us frankly kind of learned the system
Mm-hmm.
and just had our enthusiasm kind of lead us through, and ultimately we were able to build a really good Pac West over the years, and you've helped out in so many ways from that beginning. You continue to do all of our television and video streaming kind of stuff, covering the championships.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's just been a great relationship. I have to tell the folks that are watching, when Wayne shows up at any event, it's like electricity just came into the room. And that means Wayne has arrived, and everybody is just so up because he's got this positive, infectious personality. And they're just really neat stuff. And the student athletes get excited because they love to watch the videos that you put together. The coaches, the administrators are all excited. So you've made a great impact on the PacWest. And it's hard to believe now that you came on sometime in that first year, which I believe was in the fall of 2007.
Yep, right
I'm
after
starting
August.
14th year now.
Wow, yeah.
14th year as the commissioner, yeah.
That's incredible. And we, in when we talked about you brought up my energy because and I appreciate that, but it's something I learned from you too. And I talk to other people when I something I bring up before I bring it on air. I'm like, the energy has to be there because I remember those mornings you would get on me because I have to get up so early and drive down to the studio on Makaloa, what street is that, off of Keamoku at the the HPR building, whatever building we were next door.
Right.
And I remember you muting it and saying, you better get your energy up. And it's so true. Like all of those things like that, they read, and those are all little technical things, but along the way, you just kind of pick them up. And I appreciate all that that you've, all the places that you've sent me, all the little tasks you've given me, because that's definitely something that every little bit has influenced me along the way. So, but, and we'll talk about the PacWest, because I know you have some announcements coming up this week, probably, and talking to the presidents, as we know at the what the PacWest is Division II conference, associated NCAA Division II, member schools in Hawaii here, like of course Chaminade, Hawaii Pacific, UH Hilo, and the Commish now based in now we're in base Newport still, right, is our official base, or Irvine or Orange County.
The Irvine is the official base.
Oh, Irvine.
But right now we've actually gone virtual. The whole world has gone virtual.
That's right.
Ironically, we got the okay to go virtual at the end of last year. So when this unfortunate thing came down on us with COVID, we were already in place and didn't have to transition into our home offices. So this literally is the second bedroom in our little place here on Balboa Island, and but it's worked out really well, and
you folks will have I was gonna say that meeting. Sorry, to get back to I'm trying to, because I know that I'd read a great article with you and Mr. Guillen, Pat Guillen at UH Hilo. Shout out to the Vulcans. Listen, all those listening on Hilo, we have some great Hilo boosters who join us at Hawaii Sports Fans. But we really want the student athletes to have that experience, because we, as former athletes ourselves, that's our biggest, motivators. Being on the court, being with our teammates, being with our coaches. Like that's something you can only be one age once. You never know what the next. So, of course, we want that experience, but there's so many obstacles and hurdles, and just tell us where we are in the process right now, at least with the PacWest.
Sure, and our process is the same process that conferences are going through all across the country right now. We are facing a challenge like we've never faced before with COVID-19, and I would say that every single conference will tell you that their number one priority is their student athletes. And when we talk about the student athletes, we're not only trying to back them from their competitive attributes and their academic endeavors, but their health and safety. And so the NCAA several months ago said, ultimately, the decision about whether or not to go forward in the fall or delay or play is going to be up to the conferences. So we've had so many of these Zoom meetings going on with athletic directors and athletic trainers and presidents. And so it's all culminated, at least for the PacWest. Tomorrow we'll have a big president's call in which we'll make the decision as to whether or not we're going to go forward or not with the fall.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a big meeting.
Mm-hmm.
We'll have an announcement. By this time tomorrow, there'll be an announcement out on that decision. And the athletic directors have had a number of meetings in the past several days, coming up with different options that we might consider with fall, whether we delay it, whether we postpone it, or whether we do some other different decision. And the presidents are weighing, all the various factors about not only the student athletes, but bringing the students back to their campuses, and what that would look like. Do they have to worry about social distancing? Do they have to worry about testing? Do they have to worry about the facilities of where they play, and how do they monitor, and how do they keep track of all these things? I mean, it's just amazing. When we put together a COVID task force and looked at all the different protocols, you've probably heard about, what Major League Baseball is doing, or the NBA, or the NFL, and they talk about these documents that just have dozens and dozens of pages. Well, similarly, we've done that at NCAA Division II and in the PacWest, and it's amazing how many different protocols that you have to think about, and then the testing requirements. The NCAA just sent out a new document just this past week in which they detailed all the various testing requirements. They call them guidelines, but our presidents, no doubt, are going to follow those guidelines.
Yeah.
And ultimately, it's how often do you test, depending on what sports that you're involved in. Is it a high contact sport? Is it a medium contact sport? Is it a low contact sport? So all of this information is going to be coming at the presidents tomorrow. We'll give the options to them. We'll sit back, we'll have the conversation, and the presidents will make that decision.
So the NCAA hasn't made any decisions regarding their championships yet for a fall, have they?
Right. Okay, and so we've had many meetings with the NCAA. Their championships committee are looking at all the different options. There's been a lot of talk lately, not only in our conference and on the West Coast, but on the East Coast and across the country. And you've probably seen it in the newspapers about whether or not some sports might move to the spring, right? And so the NCAA, should they consider moving some championships? At this point, they've resisted moving any championships because in all the divisions, you count D1, D2, D3, there's 90 championships that you got to come up with. And so imagine when you've got it all planned out, and it's already fairly crowded. Yeah. Now think about the idea that, you might move some of those later on in the year, and what a challenge that might be. So at this point, and they want all the divisions to do the same thing.
Of course, yeah, because you can't have some conferences play in the fall and then have the championships in the spring or something.
Right, exactly. So the Board of Governors, it's my understanding, will meet on Friday and talk a little bit more about that. That's the NCAA Board of Governors. Yeah. And of course, the PacWest, we're meeting on Thursday. There's already 2 conferences in the West that have already made their decision on what to do with fall sports. The CCAA, that's the California Collegiate Conference, they've decided to move everything back to after January 1. The GNAC, the Great Northwest Conference, schools up in Washington, Oregon, Idaho, up into Alaska, they've said that after December 1. And every conference is different. They have different types of schools, different missions with their schools, the size of their schools. We're a very diverse conference in the type of schools that we've got in Northern California, Southern California, and Hawaii. And so we have to look at all of those different things and the considerations that they have. One size doesn't necessarily fit all, but there is one thing that everybody can agree on, and that is that we want our student athletes safe.
So if it's been said that a lot of athletics programs could be at stake. I mean, the very existence of them if the season doesn't go forward. So is there a fear that, now in our conference in the PacWest, Notre Dame de Namur, who, just joined when we, took when you took over the PacWest and when I came on board. I mean, to see their whole, joining till departure, it's kind of sad. You don't see athletics programs. You think of all of these athletes that have come through, but we know that it can be very tenuous, the existence of a program, just because how expensive sports are. So is there that fear at the Division II level or in our conference as well that we need to have sport?
I would say that higher education overall, and we're not talking about any specific divisions, so from 1, 2, 3, the NAIA, you throw all of the schools in higher education. This is one of those moments where several years from now, people are going to look back and say, wow, that was huge. Yeah. We either weathered that storm, we struggled through that storm, or we didn't make it through that storm, right? And so I think that that's where we are right now. It's ironic. Just the other day, and I know this is going to sound like a plug for my daughter, but my daughter,
doctor,
she just got her doctorate.
Yes, and, of course.
And the folks in Hawaii, of course, remember watching Becky Hogue play basketball.
Shout out Becky Hogue. Hope she's watching out there, Dr. Hogue. Hope you're watching.
But she starts her first teaching job. She wants to be a professor, and she starts her first teaching job at Harvard here in the fall. So they've gone online.
Wow.
And she was, commenting about how fortunate that she feels to, have this opportunity. She's working extremely hard, and she knows that this is a really challenging time. Anybody who's in the business, in higher education, whether you're a teacher, whether you're an administrator, whether you're in athletics, whether you're in something else, you know what we're involved in right now.
Yeah.
And think about it from the standpoint of, let's say take it back to your days. You play athletics. You're at Vassar. You're a volleyball player. Okay, and you find out right now that you may or may not play, or you hear that, okay, well, my season might get delayed, or they're not playing as many games. It may affect your decision as to what it is that you want to do.
Yeah, of course.
And so multiply that by hundreds, if not thousands, of students and student athletes across the country. To get back to your original question, yes, it's going to have an impact on the future of colleges, universities, and potentially athletic programs.
Whew. I had to take a deep breath after that one.
Take a deep breath. You really do. And
wow.
Anybody who works in this business knows that. I've had conversations with my fellow commissioners. We're all well aware of it, and we're trying to do everything in our power to present options that are in the best interest of our member schools, and that our member schools can, hang their hat on when they do make the ultimate decision. And so that's just it's really, really key. And then you think about the student athletes. I mean, think about I'm almost 67 years old. I mean, I've had a wonderful life in the world of sports, and I hope it continues for a long time. But I'm not 19.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And where you've been waiting for this moment forever, right?
Yeah, of course.
And
yes.
now all of a sudden you're like, well, are we going to play or not play?
Yeah.
What's going to happen? Or what should I do?
Yeah.
I mean, just all of these kinds of things. Plus, maybe you're gung-ho and you really want to play.
Yeah.
But you're wondering, gee, if I play, could I get sick?
Yeah, of course.
I mean, or am I going to get through it? nothing's going to happen to me. I'm invincible.
Yeah.
Right. So I mean, there's so many things that we have to look at, and then there's the health when you stop and think about collegiate sports at the Division I level. College football, so huge.
Yeah.
Multi-million-dollar business, well, maybe billion.
Yeah.
And athletic directors, commissioners, presidents are looking at it and trying to make the decision as to whether to go or not go. You've already seen some conferences, they've cut out their non-conference sports, but Hawaii's already lost some non-conference games. Others have as well. At the Division II level, the thing that we depend on from a revenue source is March Madness.
Yeah.
And ultimately, March Madness, we lost it last year.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
The NCAA had enough in their reserve fund. They could save a lot of money, etc. We could weather that storm, but could we weather it again?
Yeah, of course.
For another year?
Of course.
And so that's going on. Those kinds of things are going on now all across the country.
When we talk about the fall and like you said, students might not even be coming back, right? Like they might stay home. Like we already had one Wahine volleyball player decide she was going to stay, right? The freshman of the year last year in the conference, stay in Europe and not come back. So have you been hearing that is there pressure to make a decision soon? Or is that something that is because of that type of thing happening maybe?
Well, I think that, and many of us have talked about this, is whether, what's the moral and ethical obligation here from conferences. It's not a race or a competition to try to make the first decision or to hold out and make the last decision. It's to try to make the best decision given your circumstances.
Yeah.
So I think that there is a feeling amongst our administrators and presidents that the timing is now for us to make a decision and let our student athletes know what that is, because I have fielded calls. Our schools are fielding calls. You mentioned to me about what's the Big West doing, or what's this other conference doing? Well, they're having meetings as well, and ultimately everybody's going to be making decisions. If they've not made them already, they're going to be making them here over these next couple of weeks or so, because the fall is fast approaching and we've got to fish or cut bait.
Well, as you know, PacWest doesn't sponsor football, but in Division I, University of Hawaii, obviously Manoa does, and we'll transition to that a little bit and talking about this upcoming season and whether the team can get on the field or not is obviously up in the air for the fall. But do you see similar challenges to that to the program as you see in Division II, or do you think it's even?
Well, I think the Hawaii schools have a unique situation, because not only do they have to handle the sports and the student athletes and all that stuff, but then there's the travel aspect.
Yeah.
And I've been hearing for weeks about the potential student exemption, and I was glad to see that there's a student exemption out there. That, in other words, that if the student has the test, that that they can travel, and so it's not a case of having the 14-day quarantine. If there was a 14-day quarantine for the teams that were traveling, obviously the games wouldn't happen, right? So there is the opportunity there for the University of Hawaii to have games. Ultimately, the Big West is going to have to make a decision. The WAC, the Mountain West, all the different conferences are going to have to make that at the Division I level. In our conference, because of our geography and given all the situations, we've talked about alternative schedule ideas. In other words, um, should we decide to go forward with playing, perhaps teams could play locally.
Mm-hmm.
You know, obviously the University of Hawaii is the only Division I school in Hawaii,
Mm-hmm.
but we have 3 schools in Hawaii.
Yeah.
They could play each other.
Of course.
And we have 4 schools in Southern California. We have 4 schools in Northern California. We've worked in our scheduling over the year. We talk about pod scheduling. So we have 3 pods,
Mm-hmm.
and so we have the opportunity for some creative scheduling as a base for us, for that time when we just due to start to play, that there would be this opportunity to at least start that way.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody is hoping that the coronavirus will ultimately go away, that we'll get a vaccine, and that things will improve. And so we're trying to be flexible enough to get things started when we're ready,
Mm-hmm.
and then move forward slowly, and then should things improve greatly, then we can go back to the regular type of schedules.
So in terms of a decision that could possibly come out, do you think a hard and fast decision regarding like an on or off switch could be coming, or do you think it's still it could be wait and see even after tomorrow when the president?
That's one of the reasons why our athletic directors have been giving the presidents options. And the presidents have said over the years that they appreciate this, because you want to see with anything the pros and cons of whatever these different options are. So that's not like me trying to be coy with an answer here.
Mm-hmm.
I'm telling you what's going to happen tomorrow is we're going to review options,
of course,
and then ultimately the presidents, they've been requested to make a decision. We think it's right to do it.
Mm-hmm.
They could potentially decide that they want to have another meeting later, but I think I do feel pretty good about the fact that I think that we'll have a decision by this time tomorrow.
Yeah, we'll be looking forward to it for sure.
Yeah.
Well, some other leagues, not Division I or II, not even amateur level, but the pro level, they're going to get started. And, of course, one of our favorite sports, I know one of your favorite sports, America's Pastime, is going to be having that first pitch. And I know you're excited for that. Is it the same feeling for you of an opening day? Do you have that same feeling?
No, but I'm a baseball fan and have been a baseball fan my whole life. And I think, like most baseball fans who enjoy the ebb and flow of the baseball season, a lot of people who maybe aren't baseball fans say, wow, they just have way too many games. And maybe they do, but I enjoy the pennant race, and I don't live and die whether or not my team wins the championship, although it's really nice when they do. I'm a Dodger fan, and have been all my life, and obviously they have a very good team. And some of my friends who are fans were despondent when they couldn't come to an agreement, the players and the owners, for a long time, but ultimately they were able to put it together. And you have to consider they were looking at options, and they were looking at all these different variables. They finally put it together, and they're going to start their 60-game series season tomorrow. The Dodgers are going to host the Giants, and there's not going to be any fans at the games. They've got cutouts in the stands. They're going to have piped-in sound. But it's a Dodger-Giant rivalry, and it probably wouldn't matter if they played that game in the phone booth. Millions of folks are going to tune in and watch that and enjoy the fact that baseball is back. I know they're going through all their different protocols and that are hoping that everybody stays safe and healthy. And I guess we'll find out if they're able to play the entire 60-game series and then go on and have playoffs and World Series beyond that. It's a big test case. And you mentioned other sports as well. The NBA is starting at the end of this month down in Orlando. The NFL is going to try to get themselves underway. College football teams are making that decision. And wow, I mean, in the world of sports, the next several weeks are going to be huge, because if these first few out of the gate things don't go well, I mean, if you thought the dominoes went down fast in March, just wait and see. If they go well, a lot of people that maybe were thinking, hey, we should close up shop, maybe they might rethink that.
Well, we look forward to those things as well, because, you know, a lot about the game, you talked about the cutouts and you talked about the piped in noise, and so much of the game is that noise, right? You talked about listening to Vin Scully growing up when you're, you know, chilling with the foxes at the beach of Santa Monica or whatever you're doing, you know, in 1973.
They weren't chilling with me. I was just the kid down in the sand. I think you're probably too young to remember this, but there were commercials back then where, you know, the stud guys came by and then they kicked sand on the nerd sitting on the towel. Well, that was probably me. But in any case, one thing that you could do back then, and we're talking back in, you know, the late 60s and early 70s, going to the beach in Southern California in the summertime, is you literally could walk down the beach and you would hear the Dodger game.
Wow.
People would walk around with their transistor radios, or they would put them down on the beach mat or on the beach towel, and you could hear Vin Scully or Jerry Doggett, who was the other announcer, doing the game. And it was remarkable to think, you know, nowadays people are you know, all tuned into their iPhone or whatever the case may be. You know, back then, transistor radios, that's what people were tuned into. And I can remember, you know, even younger days than, you know, my teenage years, literally falling asleep with the transistor radio under my pillow.
Wow.
Sometimes I'd sit there in the dark keeping score, you know, to the Dodger game, and I'm sure that my story was played out across the country, whether or not you were a Cub fan or an Indians fan or Tigers fan or Orioles, Braves, whatever you were, of young kids, you know, falling in love with baseball because of the sound they heard on the radio. Then you go to and you know the thrill of going to the stadium,
of course,
and that first time that you go in there. Do you honestly care whether there's a lot of people?
Nope.
Or that there's just you, and that incredible feeling that you have. And I remember being a young sportscaster and walking in like, well, they're having practice, and I get to go in and interview them. Just going in the ballpark itself was like chicken skin. It was just such an awesome experience. I believe the baseball players of today, they're going to feel like they're kids again. It's going to be a game, and there's going to be actually some benefits of the fact that there's not 50 or 60,000 people there.
Of course, yeah.
And they're gonna feel that incredible energy of playing a game that they love, and it's gonna take them back to when, you know, they were playing a JV game as a freshman in high school, and there was 6 people watching them.
Yep.
You know, and they gave it their all then, and they're going to give it their all this time as well. So, you know, hopefully we'll get through this in a positive way, and keep your fingers crossed that they can keep on playing.
So in your broadcasting career, were you able to work a Dodger game and meet Vin Scully and talk about, you know, that opportunity? Your career, you know, took you all over the world too, so I'm assuming you overlapped with the Dodgers at some point.
Well, you know, ironically, I did get a chance to do a few Major League games play-by-play, and what a thrill that was with the A's and the Giants. I did games in Seattle, Oakland, Phoenix, Milwaukee. Didn't do a lot of Major League Baseball games, but I did get to do some, and it was
that is
an incredible
so cool.
thrill. But Vin Scully has always been one of my, like, literally, like, top 5 heroes in my entire life. And I interviewed Vin Scully when he was about ready to do the Hawaiian Open out at Waialae. And
Wow.
this was at a time when Vinny had branched out to more than just the Dodgers
Mm-hmm.
or Major League Baseball on NBC. He was doing golf. He had done football for a little while, and he had done the Hawaiian Open there for a number of years. And this was in the early 90s. We just started Hawaii Sports Final on KHON.
Mm-hmm.
And so I contacted him. He was staying out at the Kahala Hilton, and was able to get, permission to interview him. And I remember it was interesting. The word came back, and this is not uncommon when you try to, interview somebody who's, quote, a huge name. He said, "Yep, okay, well, I can be there at 3 o'clock, 5 minutes. That's it."
Wow.
So
Wow.
we
You
didn't
better
want
have the
we
question
didn't-
ready.
we didn't want to miss anything. So he said 3 o'clock. We were there probably at 2:15, all set up with a camera, just in case, right?
Yeah.
And,
You don't want
and
to stand up
literally,
Scully.
I remember we're set up there, and we're over in the press tent, and just like out of nowhere, right at 3 o'clock, right on the dot, Vin Scully appears, and I knew I'd already told my cameraman, let's go. And so boom, we just started right in with the interview. And I recall very vividly that I believe I asked him 5 questions. He gave me 5 1-minute answers, and maybe we were able to follow up there with a 6th question, and ultimately the interview was 6 minutes and 15 seconds. It was 6 minutes and 15 seconds of absolute magic.
Wow.
I came back and I thought, I don't need to edit this at all. It is so beautiful. Every single word was just chosen perfectly, and they described moments that were magical, from the home run that won the 1988 World Series to Asao Aoki's eagle that won the Hawaiian Open, and a little bit about his career, and oh my goodness sakes, and we ran it in its entirety.
Wow.
And I'll never forget that. One of the most magically fantastic interviews that I've ever been able to participate in. And for a guy who had said he was only going to give us 5 minutes, he was positive, energetic, and a gentleman, both at the beginning and at the end. He thanked me, he looked me in the eye, and then he was off.
Wow.
And I'll never forget that. What a class guy.
And as a fan, that kid inside of you, I know, you grew up in La Habra and California, Orange County, and you, got a chance to be in proximity to so many great athletes through your life, from, baseball players, football players. But what do you think when you think about your childhood and being a fan in particular? What images come to your mind?
Well, growing up there, first off, my dad loved the game, and my mom was tremendously supportive. Didn't necessarily play sports in high school. She went to Punahou. And
that's right.
My dad grew up in the Phoenix area. They met at Whittier College. Were married in Central Union Church there in Hawaii.
Wow.
Yeah. So we have the Hawaii ties, and my grandparents, lived in Hawaii. My grandfather, by the way, I remember him listening to the transistor radio back in the day, the recreations of the Giants games, or the recreations of the Hawaiian Islanders. It's just he was a huge fan.
Well, talk about recreations for one thing, because that's like such an antiquated thing. So explain how that works.
Okay, and Les Kiter, who I worked with at Channel 2, was absolutely brilliant at it. And it's hard to imagine now, because you pick up your phone, right, and everything is like instantaneous.
Of course.
Imagine that the only information that you're going to get is through a teletype machine. Okay, so that you would have this little machine that's making a lot of chatter in the back room, and it essentially is sending you all the information about a ball game, right? Let's
Mm-hmm.
say that the Islanders are playing the Seattle Rainiers in Seattle. So ultimately, you're going to be getting this little chatter about the game. You know, it'll say, you know, Lopes. The fourth inning, and it maybe just says Lopes grounds out to second, and that's all.
Wow.
That's all that it says. Okay, and then the next we oftentimes watch the stat tracker.
Yeah.
You know, when
Like the game
right?
cast.
And
Yeah.
you get a little bit of information on the game,
Mm-hmm.
and you have to imagine the moment, right? And sometimes there's that lull. Well, imagine now Les Kiter, he's getting that feed, and he has to keep talking about the game. So he literally would make up stuff. He would probably have he might have a drawing of the ballpark, and then he'd be talking about, you know, the peanut vendor and the manager coming out and talking a lot of things that literally did not happen.
Mm-hmm.
So he just literally had to make those things up.
Mm-hmm.
And then he had some crowd noise, so he could raise the crowd noise.
Wow.
He had a little block of wood. I believe it was with a pencil. And so when he ultimately was ready, here's the 2-1 pitch, boom, and he would hit that so that you'd hear the little click of the bat, right?
Yeah.
And you know, Lopes with a ground ball to second. It's fielded over there by a Shea. Throw to first. Ooh, close play. He gets him. You know, that kind of a thing. But in the meantime, he's now got to fill all the time.
Yeah.
And sometimes his teletype might break down.
Mm-hmm.
And so he might have to talk about the fact that, you know, a thunderstorm rolled in, and they've got to get the tarp out there. And maybe these things didn't even happen. But he has to make them go. Now, on the positive side, it might take 3.5 hours to do a major league or a minor league baseball game in real time. Well, because they didn't necessarily do it in real time, let's say that, for example, they weren't going to go on the air until, and I'm just kind of like making this up, 6 o'clock in the evening in Hawaii. Well, the game actually started, Hawaii time might have started at 4:30, right? Okay. So he might literally do a 3.5 hour game in an hour 45. Right? Because he'd already have some of the teletype,
of course,
when he started, and he just had to know that, you know, I have to pace this out.
Yeah, you could save a lot of time.
And the other thing is, there were no spoiler alerts.
Yeah, none.
There wasn't somebody out there that was sending messages around on other teletypes around there. So he had a captive audience.
Yep.
And he could bring about this great story. And you know, so you know, Les was amazing, and to think that there are people that did this recreation, not just him, but others around the country, is quite remarkable. And so I just know myself that you asked about, you know, what it was like as a kid growing up and loving sports. Your imagination brings so much forward. You know, whether it was Vin Scully, you know, calling the Dodgers, Dick Enberg called the Angels and also the UCLA basketball team, Chick Hearn with his creative sayings, you know, doing the Lakers games, and you know, and then, you know, listen to Tom Kelly doing the football games. I can remember literally being 9 or 10 years old and going out and playing football in the street and playing the announcer at the same time. I remember going on my driveway in junior high school and playing every game of the NBA Finals. I was every single player. I announced the game.
Wow.
I played the game. I kept score of the game. And, of course, you know, I would always try to make my team win in the seventh
of course.
game of the NBA Finals. But the point is that imagination and play came together, and it created this just tremendous love of sports, and something that I've enjoyed and stayed with for all my life.
Yeah, it's still going strong. Our first tour ever at Hawaii Sports Fans 2012, our inaugural tour. I want to ask you, because you were a guest on that tour and you shared some great stories. We started, so imagine this, I never led a tour before, but I wanted, for all those people out there listening who don't really know much about Hawaii Sports Fans, this was our very first tour. We started in San Diego and watched the Padres and Braves, and Chipper Jones, that was his last game in San Diego, so it was a cool send-off. Went up to see the Angels and the Red Sox play. Then we saw the Dodgers and the D-backs with Shane Victorino meeting us afterwards. And then we got to see Bob's alma mater beat up on UH at the Coliseum. But looking back on that trip and all of our places that we went and all the people that we met, what are some memories that you have from that time?
Well, I just thought you were amazing to have this vision of trying to put this together. And I thought, like, wow. This young man is quite remarkable. To think that he's going to have people out there that have the same passion about sports that he does, and that they're going to want to go on this kind of a journey. I honestly wasn't sure if something like that could actually happen, and you told me about it, and you said, hey, you were going to try to work it around a Hawaii game. As it turned out, UH was playing USC, which was serendipitous in the fact that
Norm Chow's first game too. Norm Chow's first ever game.
Yeah, so it was a chance for me to go back, and I remember I was there with the Hawaii people sitting on the Hawaii sideline, but so I had both my teams out there on the field, and of course I really felt in my heart that SC was going to win the game. But I wanted Hawaii to play well, and so I do vividly remember that. But the neat thing is that you got other moments, and you brought them in. That was the first time that I had been down to the new ballpark in San Diego.
Yeah, San Diego, Petco.
And since then, I've seen a number of games there, and it's just. I remember their old stadium, Jack Murphy Stadium. In fact, Hawaii played football there a number of times, and it was not a fun place to go watch a baseball game. There was no intimacy there at all. It was this big, giant, concrete stadium out in the middle of a canyon, and it wasn't fun to go there. The ballpark that they have now in San Diego has a wonderful feel to it.
Yeah.
In the case of since then, I've come down on the train, and I've walked over through all the little restaurants and pubs that are in the area there to watch the game. And that day, I drove down, parked in the parking lot, but it's not that big of a stadium, and so it was a great experience there. I'll be honest with you, I don't really remember any of the game. I just remember thinking like, wow, this is a beautiful place.
Yeah.
It's a great place to watch a game.
It was.
And since then, I've gone to, I can think of two vivid memories of going to a game in San Diego. I've gone to more than that, but one was to watch the Red Sox in a year in which, the Red Sox would go on and win the World Series. And then another time it was with the Cubs. In both cases, there were more visitor fans that were at the San Diego game than there were Padre fans. And I've talked to enough Padre fans who've told me that happens quite a bit down there.
Yeah.
But it was fun to be a part of that, and I love going back, and I appreciate that you were the first one that gave me that chance. Going to the Dodger game that next night, and
Angel game the next night, and then Dodger.
That's right. The Angel game, and then I know you. I was there when the Angels first started. I remember they used to play at a little ballpark in Los Angeles. It has since been torn down. It was called Wrigley Field, which was the old minor league part. And then they shared a home with the Dodgers. And in the early 60s, they called it Chavez Ravine when the Dodgers called it Dodger Stadium. And then they eventually, in the mid-60s, I think it was about 1965, they opened up the Big A in Anaheim. And I remember going with my dad. I was probably 12 years old. And literally, it was this big cement block of a stadium out in the middle of nowhere. You went down State College, and it was, I mean, there was nothing else there.
Wow.
Okay? And we you know, I grew up in La Habra, you mentioned, in North Orange County, so it was maybe, 15, 20 minutes from our house, and there would be no traffic. And we went there to watch the Angels play. They had pretty good team at the time, and it was fun to watch them. But I'll admit that my heart was with the Dodgers. From the time that I could literally play catch with my dad, became a Dodger fan. We went to games at the old LA Coliseum. I can remember, sitting behind the short fence out there in left field. Well, it's actually a high fence on a short porch, if you can imagine.
So was it like the Monster? Was it further out than the Green Monster?
I believe, if memory serves me correct, that it was only 270 feet down the left field line.
Wow.
And in the meantime, to hit the ball out and right was 400 feet. And then they had a gigantic screen way up. And then you knew that the left fielder, for example, was playing right up against the screen. And so I remember, the Dodger fans, of course, the first game I think I went to was against the Giants, and I was probably 7 or 8 years old, and the fans are yelling. At the time, it was actually Orlando Cepeda who was playing out in left field.
Wow.
Yeah, he played a little bit of outfield and a little bit of. Obviously became known as a first baseman years later, but I remember that, how the proximity to the players. So when Dodger Stadium opened in 1962, all of Los Angeles was just in awe. It still is a very beautiful stadium in a very beautiful setting, and there was something about going to a Dodger game. Invariably, you'd see some, Hollywood star would throw out the first pitch, or you would see, Doris Day or somebody would be, down in the third row watching the games or something like that. And you knew that it was this incredibly special experience to be there, because you'd listen to Vin Scully. So, of course, you had to look up in the press box to see where he was. And just an incredibly wonderful experience to grow up and actually now see them on the big stage. So when I played baseball in high school, and then I went to SC and was fortunate enough to get a chance to play ball there. I wanted a summer job, and my roommate at the time, he was another kid from La Habra. He had literally, on the spur of the moment, one day decided, hey, you know what? I wonder what those guys are doing there in the straw hats that show you to your seats at Dodger Stadium. And so we went up and asked somebody, and got offered a job.
Oh, wow.
So he told me about it. He brought me down, and I got a job. This is my, literally my freshman year in college. So that became my summer job, actually my alternate summer job, because the Dodgers are home, maybe for 10 days. They go out of town for 10 days. So you'd have a big summer job, and then your night summer job. I worked as an usher at Dodger Stadium, and this was the end of '71 till the beginning of 1975. So some good Dodger teams during that time, and in 1974 they went to the World Series. Got to work that game. Still one of my greatest thrills. I got to work the club section, the stadium club section, and that's where they had all the VIPs. And so you name all the, you know, big names of baseball at that time. You know, the Dodgers and the A's were in that, but you know, whether it was Sparky Anderson was there, or Whitey Herzog, or Billy Martin, or whoever, they all came to the World Series, and there they were, right me. I mean, I thought, like, I know I'm supposed to be working here, but I wish I could go and, you know, get people's autograph.
Yeah, I'm sure.
We didn't have iPhones back then, so you couldn't take a selfie. So I mean, you just had to.
They lug the big camera and the flag light bulb around too, right?
That's right. Yeah. They couldn't do a Wayne Coito, but it was just a great experience. And then my main section for most of the 4 years that I did it there was right behind home plate. And so, you know, you see the guys with, you know, now they call them, you know, the jugs guns or whatever they call them.
Oh yeah.
Well, all the scouts were right there, so I had the, you know, great experience talking with scouts. A couple of them, in fact, you know, came down and watched me pitch.
Wow.
So it was a great experience, and something that I'll never forget. And so the fact that you now took me to a Dodger game, and then you set up this thing with Shane Victorino. What a thrill that was for us after the game. And Shane, I mean, can you imagine? I know how protective these major league players are, and that it's rare that they will, like, literally come into the stands.
Yeah.
And you know, we waited for a little bit, and he came up and he talked with us, with our whole group, in the stairwell. And I remember he was like, you know, I can't go out there because you'll really get attacked by autograph seekers and the whole thing. Yeah. But he had, you know, several minutes for us, and it was a wonderful moment. And so I thank you for that opportunity. And we had a great time. We visited, you know, we stayed in Hollywood. My wife and I, you know, went down to Hollywood and Vine. You'd think somebody that, like, grew up in Los Angeles that would have visited that area before. I've driven by it, but never, like, been a tourist.
Of course, yeah.
So we went and we were tourists.
Yep.
And then you got a limo for us to, you know, go to the game. So the point is that you do a first-class job. It's a blast. It brought back great memories for me. It created new memories. I have a wonderful picture, by the way, of my wife standing next to Marilyn Monroe, the statue of Marilyn Monroe. Of course, I had to show it to my dad, and he was like, which one's Marilyn Monroe? So my wife, Sherry,
of course, Sherry,
appreciated that. Just absolutely loved it.
Yes, well, we love Sherry. We're sending a shout out to her as well. We know she's listening. Well, you know, we're hitting our hour mark, but I know there's so much more that we have there on the docket to share. I mean, I feel like there's so many stories I learn from you, or I hear from you for the first time, and it's amazing because of, you know, we like to tell a lot of stories, and I enjoy hearing them. So we'll have to definitely do it another time. But mahalo, Commish, and we'll definitely have you again. So we'll bid you aloha at this time, though. So aloha.
Aloha, and go PacWest.
And like us on Facebook and Twitter and everything else. Okay, I always forget to say that. Bye, guys. Aloha.